You are listening to KC Sports Network, proudly presented by Emprise Bank, your partner in possible.
What is going on, Chiefs Kingdom? I'm Tucker Franklin here with you for today's KCSN Update, your daily Chiefs video and podcast from us here at KC Sports Network. Today, I am joined by none other than one-third of the KC Laboratory. Matt Laney joins me again this week to give out some post-regular season awards, some regular season awards to give out to the Chiefs players, only Chiefs players, and we'll talk about some headlines too. But before we get into it, I've got to tell you about our friends at DraftKings, and the NFL playoff picture is locked in, and my go-to place for wild card round action is DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. To kick off the road to Super Bowl 57, new customers can bet just $5 and get $200 in free bets instantly. Plus, all new and existing customers can get a no-sweat bet each day of the wild card round this weekend. Just place any NFL bet of your choice, and if it loses, you'll get a free bet back up to $10. Action's so good, why bet on the NFL playoffs anywhere else? We get to, again, sit back and watch all of this wild card action unfold, so why don't place your risk-free bet here, your no-sweat bet on this wonderful DraftKings app. I love the way it works. Here's what you got to do. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use code KCSN. New customers can bet just $5 on the NFL and get $200 in free bets instantly. Only at DraftKings Sportsbook with code KCSN. Minimum age and eligibility restrictions apply. See the show notes for details. All right, Matt, thank you for joining me once again. I think this is back-to-back weeks. This is the first time in my history of hosting KCSN Update we've had back-to-back guests, so you should be honored.
Setting records already. Let's go. I like this.
Love to see it. But Matt, I brought you here so we can dish out some postseason awards. It's award season. The Golden Globes were on Tuesday. I don't know if you know that, but weird to have an award show on a Tuesday night. So I was in the award giving spirit already.
Okay.
So we're gonna be giving out awards. But before we get to that, I also want to talk about some headlines that we've got going around.
Ooh,
First,
big news.
Before we hopped on this podcast, Tom Pelissaro tweeted out, if there's an AFC Championship game between the Chiefs and Bills, the neutral site will be Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta, the NFL announced. Maddie, your first thoughts on Atlanta hosting the AFC Championship game?
Well, it's not Vegas, which is disappointing. Would have been in Las Vegas if it got moved there. So that's why I was really, hoping that would be the way it goes. It also makes sense to go to, like, Vegas could accommodate everybody. It's relatively cheap to get to, so on and so forth, domed, but with grass. It kind of checked all the boxes other than the fact that it's really far away from both teams. And it does have events going on like during that weekend and after. So I get why it wasn't picked. Atlanta's a fine, runner-up choice. Like, it's a ho-hum choice, but it's a fine choice. I guess I don't know how much you're really expecting. You're picking a neutral site game because of a terrible thing that happened on a football field. Like, it doesn't have to be a big deal. This isn't like choosing the location of a bowl game in college football, right? Like, this doesn't need to be its own thing. However, I was kind of surprised that the NFL didn't go for the spectacle. Like, a neutral site AFC Championship game between Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen in Vegas, like, that's its own thing. Like, the hype, you can just like build it up like a pre-Super Bowl, and they just end up in Atlanta. I'm sure the game would still be great there if it happens. It's just, as a choice, ho-hum. It's turf, which is never that, not my first choice, but it's in a dome, protected from the weather. Neither fan base is really going to have a significant advantage getting there, so you're going to hold that level of neutral. So it's a fine choice. I was just hoping for Vegas. I'm kind of disappointed.
Tom Pelissaro also replied to his tweet, and he said, as a part of a standard NFL contingency planning, Atlanta was designated a possible backup host site for the postseason games prior to the start of the 2022 season, and is almost equidistant from both potential participating teams' cities. It will be played at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time on Sunday, January 29th. Now, I would assume that time is still going to stay the same if like the Bengals do beat the Bills, right? If that does happen and the Chiefs do get to host that game at Arrowhead, I would anticipate that Sunday, January 29th at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time, which a 5:30 kickoff in Kansas City is kind of a weird time. But I would assume that would stay the same. But it is interesting. Atlanta was in the plans, and I feel like Atlanta wasn't really talked about prior to like a couple of days ago. I think, Maddie, you said someone brought it up to you. I think I saw it yesterday, but it was one of those cities that nobody was really talking about.
Yeah, and I don't know. I guess I don't know why. I think everybody was like focused on trying to find a city like in between a direct route from Kansas City to Buffalo and not
Yeah.
particularly looking outside of this like direct path.
Right.
And so Atlanta makes sense though. Like I'm su- this is I guess going to show my weakness of geography, but I'm relatively surprised that it's equidistance between the two of them.
Yeah.
I maybe it's skewed because of where I now live in North Carolina, and I'm not quite as ready for how far east Atlanta is. But I was kind of surprised. Either way, easy to fly into though, especially from Kansas City. I don't know how
Yeah.
Buffalo's airport works, from Kansas City to Atlanta is a very common flight. So I think it makes sense. I think it'll be pretty neutral. I just wish it was in Las Vegas. That would have been a lot more fun for me personally.
Absolutely. I agree. Would have been more fun for me too, but we've got some more news that came across. This is an interesting one. This is coming from the Chiefs Wire. Shout out to our guy Charles Goldman over there at the Chiefs Wire, absolutely grinding this stuff out. An interesting note that he wrote: Chiefs to roll over roughly 2.8 million in salary cap space for 2023. It's a something that maybe the Chiefs can work with. That's at least a contract that the Chiefs can extend out.
Yeah, I thought maybe it'd be a little bit more. Some of the decisions, I knew they were a little cap strapped this year. So I guess I get why, but just the way that I didn't feel like they spent big or spent very much, especially after like the big Tyreek Hill trade and stuff. I thought maybe they'd have a little bit more to roll over. So seeing that that's all it was is a little disappointing, but at the same time, like I'm not going to get bent out of shape between 2.8 million versus like a five or something. I would have thought it
Right.
would be. That's not my money. That's for them to figure out. Just I was surprised it wasn't a little bit higher. Was all.
That's fair, and I think that going into this season, well, later, kind of as the season was developing, we kind of learned that the Chiefs were a little bit of strapped for cap space, especially when it came to around the trade deadline when it came to trading guys. So, good to see that they did have a rollover. A quick one: Chiefs running back Jerick McKinnon was named AFC Offensive Player of the Month for both December and January. They combined those last 2 months because obviously January is not a full month. Um, had one heck of a month of December, let alone January as well. So Jerick McKinnon getting that nod, and also Chiefs linebacker Nick Bolton named finalist for the 2022 Professional Dick Butkus Award. Big news, big accolades for some Chiefs players.
Yeah, so for December and January, Jerick McKinnon had 9 touchdowns, 8 receiving, and 1 rushing. He had, what are we looking at here? 142 rushing yards, averaging over 4 yards per carry, 275 receiving yards, and over 10 yards per catch. Like he had a monster month here, as we're just gonna label it, and even more so than what the stats is just how important he was, I think, to the Chiefs' red zone offense during that time. Like how many plays the Chiefs were getting him on little rub routes out into the flat in the red zone, finding him on screens that he was able to convert into touchdowns, even catching a couple little like shovel passes late in the down from Patrick Mahomes. The Chiefs were struggling to figure out the red zone while McCole Hardman and Kadarius Toney were hurt. And
Mhm.
Jerick McKinnon did a great job stepping into that and kind of not necessarily taking that role, but doing enough to kind of cover up the gaps a little bit here for the Chiefs. And so that way you didn't feel that drop off as much.
Absolutely. I think Jerick McKinnon was a huge piece to this team's success. His one rushing touchdown, I like to point this out, was the walk-off touchdown against the Houston Texans. So kind of a big deal. His one rushing touchdown was kind of big, and I think
Oh,
it's
he
like a
said he was going to score it too. He called it. He called a
yeah.
shot.
Yeah, that's pretty sick. And I think it's like a month and 2 games, right? So it's like it's 6 games, but still, 6 touchdowns, 9 touchdowns in 6 games is an incredible clip. I don't care if it's a little bit more than a month. Jerick McKinnon deserved it. He deserved to be AFC Player of the Month. Excited to see Nick Bolton, who second in the NFL in tackles, just behind. I'm not even going to try to pronounce his name. The dude from the Jaguars who had one heck of a fourth quarter to overtake Nick Bolton in terms of tackles. BJ was not very happy with that. And I know there's some people in the KCSN Discord that were also not happy with that, who had the same bet that BJ had for Nick Bolton to lead the league in tackles. It was very close. It was so close, but good year in the tackle department for Nick Bolton, tackle machine.
So you just gotta get that hometown scorekeepers to fix up the books a little bit more.
Yep. Stat
And,
corrections.
this is for every single team. So this is not just the Chiefs and just Nick Bolton. But if you go back and count how many tackles Nick Bolton, like you see him make, and then go compare that to the stat sheet, the difference is wild. He gets a lot of extra credit for getting a hand on a guy as he's going to the ground. And this is again the same for a lot of teams. The teams have done it. I think it became really prominent when Zach Thomas played for the Dolphins. I think when a lot of people started talking about how he's late adding, getting assisted tackles and stuff. It's funny because you see a lot of games with 16 tackles, and you're like, now wait a second, I don't know about that. And then you go back and count, you're like, okay, well that's fine. So yeah, he's got to home cook a little bit better next time, guys. Come on, Kansas City.
Quick story before we get into our awards. I used to be the spotter for Northwest Missouri State when we would do like the
Oh,
team stat stuff. And I was a defensive spotter one year, the offensive spotter another year. And on the defensive spotter, I would just throw guys in that were around there. Like, yeah, give him the tackle. So I've been firsthand. I've been the guy who's like, oh yeah, he was there. Given a guy getting run out of bounds, getting forced out of bounds, but there's two guys in the area, give them both tackle. That's what I would do. Help those guys out. Offense is a little bit a little bit harder to call out and everything, but no, it's always fun to do that. But Maddie, let's get into these post regular season awards. These are the same awards you're going to be seeing handed out at the NFL Honors, that I believe is the week before the Super Bowl. It's during that like Pro Bowl week that they try to fancy up, and they've announced the Pro Bowl events that I think so. I saw somebody, I can't remember who said this, but all the events look like they're trying to go viral on social media, is what they said, and which I think is incredibly fair because that's probably what they're trying to do. But the NFL Honors is just another piece of that, trying to go viral on social media. They got a host. It's a whole award show. It's a whole ordeal. Maddie, we're not making this a whole ordeal for the Chiefs post regular season awards. We are going to do most improved player, rookie of the year, defensive player of the year, offensive player of the year, and then obviously MVP. But we're not going to put Patrick Mahomes as the MVP, right? But non-Patrick Mahomes MVP.
I'm gonna take him out of the offensive player of the year race too.
I think that's also fair. Yeah, I don't
Just
I don't have him down. So, Maddie, let's get started with most improved player.
Oh, you're putting me on the spot with like the most difficult one on the top, like the one that probably is going to require the most thought provoking. I'm struggling to come up with the guy. Do you have one? You go
Yeah, I'll go. Okay.
first.
Yeah, I'll go
Give me a
first.
second here.
So I actually wrote down two, and both of these guys are on the
Okay.
defensive side of the ball.
Yeah.
I think the one I'm going to go with though is Mike Dana. Mike Dana had
Ah,
one heck of a year this year, playing on the inside, mixing in on the outside, getting to the quarterback, bringing the quarterback down. Charger killer Mike Dana could come in real clutch if the Chiefs do face the Chargers next week. But I think that guy, seeing what he had, last year, I don't think there was a whole lot of expectations for him. This year, I don't really think there was a whole lot of expectations either. But as BJ and I have talked about on Outside the Trenches, BJ talked about this with Brett Coleman on yesterday's KCSN update about just the Chiefs' defensive line and their ability to get home. And I think they're second in the league in sacks this year compared to 29th last year. And not a whole lot changed on that defensive front other than, lose Alex Okafor, you add Carlos Dunlap, and you add Joe Cullen, right? Like those are probably the three biggest changes out of
selling
those.
Big George short.
Okay, George was added as well. But I'm saying you didn't get your marquee pass rusher. You didn't get your who's that in Minnesota? Zaire Smith? Zaire who am I
Keep
thinking
going.
of?
I'm gonna let you fight it until you get there. You're close.
Buddy, I don't know if I'm gonna get Taylor.
Zadarius
Zadarius
Smith.
Smith. Ah, Zaire Taylor's a college basketball player. I'm pretty sure. Let me know in the comments who Zaire Taylor is. But so they didn't get that guy. They didn't get the guy that they wanted to in free agency to bring in and kind of have another 1-2 punch behind Frank Clark. And they brought back Frank Clark too. So like that's a whole other thing. So I think that Mike Dana's improvement did help this offensive or this defensive front in total kind of revamp their passing attack.
I'm also going to go defensive side. I'm also going to go
Ooh,
with the defensive line, and I'm going to go with Colin Saunders.
yeah.
From healthy scratch last season at times, once you would assume he returned from his injury, I guess there's no guarantee he was 100% healthy, but the Chiefs were not in any kind of hurry, rush, or trying to get Colin Saunders on the field last year. And the defensive line, as Tucker was just saying, was a little thin. They weren't dominating games and stuff, so they could have used some juice. Not there this year. Then this season, it comes around and Colin Saunders starts getting a little bit more run, especially once Tershawn Wharton gets hurt and you
Yeah.
lose Tershawn Wharton for the season. The Chiefs are looking for a little bit more juice, a little bit more pass rush up the middle. And, Colin Saunders ended the year with, I think, 3.5 sacks, a handful more pressures. It wasn't like he was lighting it up as an interior pass rusher, but you could feel his impact. And so when you go from being a guy that the team isn't really trying to get on the field to being a very important part of the rotation. It even got to the point at times where fans were asking for him over Derek Nottie
Mhm.
against the run. And that's still very clearly, Saunders' weaker part of his game is holding up against the run. It's just he was playing better than Derek Nottie was at Derek Nottie's own strength at times. So his improvement this year, his ability to really grind it out, get through the injuries that were slowing him down, and get out there on the field and compete because he was fighting for a roster spot and not just make it, but then also have a big impact. So I think we'll go with Colin Saunders.
Yeah.
Most improved player was kind of tricky because the Chiefs have so many rookies or even new players that stepped in to fill these roles that they got good performances from, or they already had really good players that, yeah, maybe they took a step forward, but uh, saying Chris Jones is the most improved player might actually be accurate because he did have his best season far and away. But
Yeah.
also it feels like a slap in the face to most improved player award to give it to somebody that was already an all pro level player, if that makes sense.
Right, 100%. And the NFLPA did their first ever All Pro team, which I think is cool. The NFLPA doing their own All Pro team. The Chiefs had four make it: Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelsey, Chris Jones. Who do you think the fourth is?
I know who the fourth is, and all I can say is Arthur Colquitt is fuming right now.
Tommy Townsend was the fourth. He's getting added to all these All Pro teams. By the way, had a phenomenal year punting the football. People don't want to talk about that, but phenomenal year punting the football. Maybe not as well as the holds, but punting it, phenomenal. Honorable mention before we move on. I had Nick Bolton in there too because I think that Nick Bolton
Okay.
really did take a step forward in this year. Not only in the tackle department, he's always going to be a tackle machine as a middle linebacker. Your middle linebacker is going to get a lot of tackles, but I do think he took a step forward in the areas that he needed to take a step forward in. So, Maddie, let's go with rookie of the year. Lots of picks, lots of choices. The Chiefs had, I believe, 10 rookies on their active roster this year. So you have a lot of choices to make.
Yeah. The Chiefs did have a lot of rookies. I think you're going to kind of boil it down to the 2 first-round picks, which is probably the way it should be. Like that's your decision. Karloff played more. His splash plays, I guess, were more splashy because he was providing real impact stats with sacks, tackles for
Mm,
loss, and pressures. And Trent McDuffie's good was a little bit more just like, hey, I'm being really good and in the right spot. So maybe doesn't look as impressive, but I'm still gonna go with Trent McDuffie, even with the missing of the time. I think the fact that the Chiefs feel comfortable letting him play outside or in the slot so L'Jarius Sneed can go shadow number one or big receivers, whatever the plan is, that's huge. Like the Chiefs haven't had that with Bashad Breeland, with Shavarius Ward, with Rashad Finn, like whoever you want to throw in there under Steve Spagnuolo. I mean, or even going back to Bob Sutton, that hasn't been something the Chiefs have done. So the fact that they feel confident enough in a guy playing as their corner two and Trent McDuffie to do multiple things, I think that says a lot of how they think about him. Go back to his game versus Jamar Chase. Like, yeah, Chase had a good game, but guess who it wasn't against? It wasn't against Trent McDuffie. When they tried him,
mm,
it didn't go as well. He's been an excellent tackler. He showed some, ability to really blitz the passer once he got kicked into the slot these last
yeah.
few games. I think he's done everything you want out of a cornerback that you go and trade up for. You're no longer really concerned about the size. And I think moving forward, I feel a little bit better about him. So I think that's what gave him the edge over Karloftis for me.
I had Trent McDuffie down on my list, but I'm gonna give mine to Isaiah Pacheco, seventh round rookie coming in, gets a
Okay.
start. He gets 803, I believe it was, yards, rushing yards, as a seventh round rookie. It's hard to argue with his production as a seventh rounder. Runs hard. Looks like everything you want from a running back that you get in the seventh round. And he said prior to coming into the season that he was going to take a grown man's job. And listen,
Took a couple.
he took a couple grown men's job. Shout out to Isaiah Pacheco. Not only Clyde Edwards-Helaire getting hurt, obviously did help him take that job, but like Ronald Jones was there. Like Ronald Jones was probably well and capable to take that job, but Isaiah Pacheco proved to be better. And shout out to Ronald Jones for getting in the end zone, as I mentioned on Outside the Trenches. I believe he's the 21st Chiefs player to score a touchdown this season. Kind of wild to think about.
It's a lot of touchdowns.
That's a lot of touchdowns and a lot of different players to score touchdowns. So let's get on to the defensive player of the year. Maddie, we've talked. Well, no, I did offense, but I was gonna say because I had McDuffie on my list, I was like, wow, we're only talking about the defense right now. But defensive player of the year, I'm curious to what you have down.
Yeah, you invoked the angry emu for your or for the rookie of the year, so I think that's good. That gave
Yeah.
us the offensive push.
Okay.
Defensive player of the year. Okay, Chris Jones. Do we need to like really discuss this one much? Right, like
Nah, not really.
he is. If Nick Bosa wasn't as good as he is, Chris Jones might legitimately have a chance at defensive player of the year, and like that says a lot because defensive tackles don't win it a lot. When you do, you're Aaron Donald, and everybody knows how good he is historically. The fact that Chris Jones was far and away better than Donald this year, better than Fletcher Cox or whoever else you're going to put up there as a defensive tech. Jeffrey Simmons, not Justin Simmons. Quentin Williams, who had a great season, but like Chris Jones was clearly the best guy at that spot. Kind of the Chiefs defense goes as he goes, especially in terms of their pass rush. So he means everything to them. Maybe he's clearly their best defensive player. He had the best year on that side of the ball. I would love to hear somebody make a case for him not being the defensive player of the year for the Chiefs.
Yeah, I put down L'Jarius Sneed as a conversation to have just because I think of
Yep.
the role that he plays, and he is now eligible for a contract extension. So
Do it.
yeah, do it quick, because he's only going to get more expensive. That's been one of I think Brett Veach's best finds was L'Jarius Sneed, but Chris Jones is a guy that should be a first team All Pro. I think Benjamin Solak tweeted out that he put him down as second team with Quentin Williams. So like his second team was Quentin Williams and Chris
His
Jones. I
his
couldn't even
second team should
remember.
have been his first team. Just
Yeah,
he had his D tackle teams flipped a little bit.
he did. I saw that and I was just like, this seems like bait. I'm not gonna take the bait. And so I didn't interact with it. But no, I think that Chris Jones' year this year, 15 and a half sacks, insane. That was more than than the Chiefs had last year. I'm pretty sure as a team. So just him single handedly being able to produce that was good, and he was good against the run as well. So I think that that's kind of an overshadowed point. So let's move on to the offensive player of the year, Maddie. We're taking Mahomes out of it. We're not talking. Mahomes is good. Mahomes is the GOAT, right? We're not doing the old trope that Coach JB wants us to do, that he's a gimmicky quarterback. That's not going to happen. We're not going to talk about that. Um, Offensive player of the year, Maddie. Who do you got?
Well, this puts me in a bind for wanting to pick an interesting topic, but then also staying on brand and true to myself. I'm gonna go with Travis Kelsey, my perennial player to non-Patrick Mahomes player to watch when we do off-season game previews heading into the week. And guess what? If you just watch Travis Kelsey every single week, you're gonna have a lot of fun doing it. So it's always been a thing. Tyreek Hill got an increasingly larger and more important role in the Chiefs offense over the years, with Andy Reid here and once Patrick Mahomes took over. But I still was always on the side of, I think the offense funnels through Travis Kelsey and they just weaponize Tyreek Hill really well off of him. That doesn't take anything away from Tyreek Hill. I just thought the offense funneled through what Kelsey did this year. I think you see exactly kind of not why, but like that's just the proof of it, right? They don't have the same field stretchers Tyreek Hill. They don't have someone clearing out all this space for Kelsey. And yet he went out and had his second best year of his career outside of his 1,400-yard season with only one less touchdown. So clearly he's still just as good as he's ever been. And you're removing Tyreek Hill, the other guy fighting for that top dog spot. It's just the year was phenomenal. He took over some games, even in games that he doesn't take over where you don't remember how big his impact was. When you go back and watch, teams are throwing 3 bodies at him on third down. Like, I believe that his first down catch percentage was like 55% or something on over 100, like over on 150 targets. Like that's insanity. Like it's just, when you really dive into his stats, like the advanced stats for receptions or whatever, it's just crazy how efficient and productive he is year after year, despite, especially this season, every defense knowing what's happening, and it just didn't matter. So he gets the nod for me.
Absolutely. 110 catches, 1,338 yards. That's 12.2 yards per catch on this season. Long of 52, 12 touchdowns. I mentioned to you before we started the show, Travis Kelce hadn't scored in 6 weeks, so he had 12 touchdowns in the first 12 weeks of the season. So he was on a 1 touchdown per game clip there. There was a little bit if you went on to DraftKings and went to the anytime touchdown score. Travis Kelce was like minus 150. Like they weren't going to give you any money for putting Travis Kelce anytime touchdown score, because it was almost a lock that he was going to score. So Travis Kelce, that's a good one. We might be talking about him again in a little bit, but I'm going to talk about Jerick McKinnon. Now, Jerick McKinnon, this Offensive Player of the Year award is a little different. We talked about him at the top of the show about how he was important in December, January, but I really think he was important going all the way back to training camp, and they chose to retain Jerick McKinnon when they did kind of had an already crowded running back room. When you talk about, I think Derek Gore was there at the same time. They drafted Pacheco. They had Ronald Jones. They signed him. They had Clyde. They they had I think up to 5 running backs at one point on this team. And they said, you know what, we still want you to come back. We still want you to be a part of this team. And I think that was a big sign. I think he's good for the locker room chemistry. That's a huge part of it as well. And for talk about this a little bit too with Nick Lecky on Outside the Trenches, for Brett Veach to have the awareness not to, number one, just like cut Frank Clark just because of the cap hit, right? Just to keep him around because of the chemistry issue, the chemistry in the locker room, knowing that his leadership is such a big thing, is a important thing for Brett Veach. And I think that you could say the same thing on the offensive side of the ball, not just to let Jerick McKinnon go. Like Jerick McKinnon was valuable last year. I don't think that Brett Veach would have forecasted him to be as valuable as he was this year down the stretch. But to keep him around and keep the kind of some locker room glued together, that's always something that you love to see. But on the field, Jerick McKinnon has always been that weapon, and I love to see that he came from San Francisco, where he did have that setback with his ACL. It's tough to see. He didn't know if he was gonna play again. Comes to Kansas City, has a couple good years. Hopefully he gets himself paid. With if that's in Kansas City, cool. If it's not in Kansas City, whatever. But glad to see what he's done with the Chiefs down the stretch here, and really he kind of propelled them to this 1 seed. If we're talking about it, they were needing some offense in times where they needed offense. Jerick McKinnon was there to catch a pass on the sideline, a dump down pass, and take it a couple few yards. But Jerick McKinnon gonna always be remembered now for that highlight where Patrick Mahomes just kind of Magic Johnson flipped the ball to him in Denver, and he took it to the house.
Yeah, no, that's gonna that's a good pick. I wanted to give a shout out to Creed Humphrey here.
Yep.
He was the guy that I considered as well. I mean, just stability, game in, game out. You know what you're gonna get. You're gonna get a guy that's gonna hold his own in the center. He's not gonna give up more than one pressure per game. He's gonna get most of your protection calls correct that he's part of. And when you get him out in space, it's gonna be essentially executed perfectly. I don't, maybe not the flashiest. I think if you watch very specifically for him, yes, he does some great things and his mobility is insane, but I don't know if it's always the most flashy. He's not flattening guys the way Trey Smith is, right? So it's
Hmm.
not as flashy, but it's just so consistent. It's so stable and so important to what the Chiefs do to have that guy next to someone like Trey Smith, who is a little bit more volatile. I think it just matters a lot for what they're doing that they have Creed Humphrey there. So like
Sure.
he's not the offensive player of the Chiefs because I mean that's clearly, Travis Kelce, but I think he's worth a shout out here because I do think a lot of what they do pivots around having him and even Joe Tooney next to him.
Yeah, for sure. I did think about some offensive linemen going into this. Orlando Brown had a really good second half of the year. Andrew Wiley was incredibly consistent. I know that sometimes there's some games over there, but like if Andrew Wiley is your worst lineman out of 5, you're in a good spot. I think that's kind of the general sentiment around it. The offensive line doing well. And when Creed does flatten guys, he gets called for holds. Like he did on the little snow globe play, which not a hold. When we go back and watch that, he just kind of owned up on a little DB, and the refs kind of felt bad for him. Is what happened. I'm convinced.
I think
I'm
the ref
convinced.
was confused. I am certain the ref was still watching the play, and then he looked back and saw a DB being flung to the ground, and he assumed that it had to be a hold. I don't think he saw a
Yeah,
lick of what actually happened. He was mesmerized by the reindeer personnel. Snow globe left.
reindeer personnel is just so good, so good. All right. Maddie, let's wrap up here with the MVP, not Patrick Mahomes, because Patrick Mahomes is the MVP. Let's say that right now. Patrick Mahomes MVP. Excluding Patrick Mahomes, who is your team MVP?
So I kind of use the other MVPs for my defensive player and offensive player of the year. I pigeonholed myself here. This is a mistake that I made. So in order to not repeat players, you're getting a different MVP. You're getting somebody else. You've mentioned him though. L'Jarius Sneed. I'm going with L'Jarius Sneed here for many of the same reasons that you mentioned. I think the defense goes as far as Chris Jones is going to take it, but I do think L'Jarius Sneed's ability to play from the slot with just the pressures that he brings, the ability to play the run from there, and then as we saw down the stretch, his ability to flex out and play and shadow top wide receivers and make sure the Chiefs can leave some one-on-one matchups out there and not constantly have to give help. I think that matters, and that matters a lot to what the Chiefs do. It allows them to weaponize Chris Jones a little bit more. It allows them to let these rookie corners settle in, maybe get a few more basic assignments for half, 3/4 of the season. So I'm going to give him the MVP. Like I said, partially because I pigeonholed myself here, but also I do think he deserves it. I think that he's been excellent this year, and on top of that, I don't know what this Chiefs secondary looks like without him. I think he not covers holes, but he enables a lot of other guys to play the way that they need to play in order to be effective. And I think Sneed's kind of like the duct tape that holds it all together.
Mm, I like that a lot. I like L'Jarius Sneed and kind of the role they've put him into now towards this end of the season. I think that's it's very exciting. I'm going to go with Travis Kelsey because I think that he outside of Patrick Mahomes, is one of the most important players on this team. And you look at some of the records that he set this year, most 100-yard receiving games by a tight end. He extended his 1,000-yard streak, I believe, to 7 seasons in a row. Mike Evans, I think, is the longest one with 9 1,000-yard seasons in a row, which is insane. Shout out Mike Evans, by the way. Um, Travis Kelsey is doing things that are incredible for his age, right? He's 33 and he's putting up, Maddie, as you mentioned, the second best year of his career at this age. So, um, Travis Kelsey is incredibly important to this offense as we watch on the breakdown every week. When you see it on the breakdown, there's always a couple of guys around Travis Kelsey, whether they're, cloud cornered or they're, manning up with another guy over the top. They're always doing stuff to make sure that they know where Travis Kelsey is. And that opens things up for other guys, especially in the red zone. You see it a lot now. I think there was one play in the red zone where Travis Kelsey had like 3 guys on him. And you're just like, okay, we'll take this easy touchdown to Jerick McKinnon then. So it's one of those things where Travis Kelsey demands so much attention, and he's still putting up these numbers. I think it's an incredible, a testament to what he's been able to do this season. As you mentioned, without Tyreek Hill, without another guy really taking a lot of the spotlight away from him, which I think is super impressive.
I could go. We could do this the rest of the podcast about just talking about Travis Kelsey,
Yeah,
but both of us have things that we probably need to get done today. So
yeah,
I don't need to dive back into too much of this again. It's simple, right? Like how many players in the league are getting double and triple teamed every third down? Not just
right.
occasionally, not just in certain alignments, not just against certain looks, every single third down, how many players in the league are getting double or triple teamed. And the list isn't long. I would argue the list is one. It's just Travis Kelsey because one, yes, it's a tight end, so it's a little bit easier. But like you can watch the Raiders and Devonta Adams. You're not getting him doubled. He is not being doubled every single third down because it would just be silly coverage wise. Now, part of that's, like I said, the position they play, but the other part is Travis Kelsey's really just that good on third downs. He is kind of the Chiefs' third down offense, like option 1A, 1B, and 1C. And then they go on to other stuff. So he means everything to their offense outside of Mahomes, of course.
Mm,
He is kind of everything about their offense. It'll be interesting the next couple of years as he does actually get older and start to show signs of aging, how they go about compensating for that. As I don't think you're going to find just another Travis Kelsey, whether that's at receiver or tight end, right? You're not going to find another guy that does what he does this easily, especially when you are picking 30 plus every year. So just that's something I got my eyes on going forward because I think this year just showed you like he is the offense outside of Mahomes. It's him, it's Patrick Mahomes, it's Andy Reid. There's
yeah.
the 3 guys involved. One of them is probably nearing kind of the end of his run. And so it's just going to be interesting to see how they replace him going forward.
Brock Bowers incoming to Kansas City. You heard it here first. Maddie, I appreciate you joining me, giving out some postseason awards, post regular season. I don't want to say postseason because it's not actually the postseason, but it's a post regular season. Kind of confusing. Post regular season awards here on KCS and Update. Make sure to catch Maddie Lane live on the KC Laboratory tonight at 8 p.m. Central Standard Time. We appreciate you joining us on today's KCS and Update, listening all the way to the end. Make sure to like the video if you're watching this on YouTube. Follow us on whatever podcast platform you are listening to on, and make sure to stick around for tomorrow as Trevor Sycamore will be back to talk about three key matchups, I assume, in the AFC Super Wildcard Weekend. There's going to be a lot of games going on, but as Chiefs fans, we get to kick our feet up and enjoy some of this action. Make sure to keep your eyes on that Jacksonville and LA game. That's probably going to be the one who determines who's going to come to Kansas City and play them. So I will be back next week, and until then, I'll talk to you later.